Sometimes the natural law is broken when a shadow looms over the most defenseless, a darkness in the shape of a man, controlling, abusive, and with the power to snatch a life just because. This is what happened to Agustina Cruz on October 22, 2021. She was only 17 years old, and at such a young age she knew terror. But unlike other monsters, the one who attacked her showed his teeth in broad daylight when, in the impassive gaze of the neighbors, he cut off the top part with a war knife. A shocked province, an ineffective policeman, and one less woman due to the toxic violence of a man who did not know and did not want to understand that Agustina did not belong to him. This and much more is what we are going to develop, what I'm going to do in this video. And the questions are, when is enough? When will the authorities take the complaints of abused girls and women seriously? Agustina lived in the Parque La Loma neighborhood, Coronel Moldes, a small municipality 40 miles from the capital of the province of Salta. She lived with her mother and grandmother, being the oldest of her 4 siblings, whose ages ranged from 4 to 14 years old. Although she didn't know her father, the figure of the man of the house was never necessary either. Guided by her mother and grandmother's love and example, she excelled. And if you want, an uncle was the closest thing to a father figure she had. The young woman grew up in a home and family full of love and happiness. By the way, this house was in Argentina. So, having just turned 17, Agustina faced one of her last years in school at Puerta de Diaz High School, just 3 blocks from her house, with great expectations. The future was just around the corner, so like any teenager, she imagined 1,000 possibilities and destinations. The joy of a successful future clearly lit her path. That was happiness, that was the joy of everything. My daughter had everything ahead of her. She had everything to live for. She was a super cheerful girl, super cheerful. She loved to put on makeup and was the chosen one at gatherings with her friends to do the same with everyone. She really liked the trendy urban music, especially trap. Like many young Argentine or Latin American women, more than once she imagined being Kazoo, Nicki Nicole, Maria Becerra. In addition, she had been practicing the saya for a long time, which is a very characteristic folk dance of the highland region, Bolivia, Peru, and northern Argentina, not very common in Mexico, which mixes the Andean musical rhythm, European Creole music, and the rhythm of African dances. That style of dance then allowed her to tap into her creative side as it pushed her to write and pour her emotions and frustrations into a notebook. Agustina then proved to be a very focused girl, as she planned to have a university career to have a solid and professional future. Her immediate goal after finishing high school was to study to become a forensic doctor. She saw herself in the future involved with crime, investigating and helping justice to find the guilty or uncovering the facts of a crime, finding justice for the victims. In this way, Agustina ended up involved with crime and forensic medicine, but unfortunately not as she imagined. She never imagined herself, her body on the slab. So Agustina began to chat on social networks with a boy named Juan Rodrigo Gallardo, a boy of just 19 years old. The young man was from Atoca, a neighborhood in the center of the capital Salta, but he often went to Coronel Moldes to visit his grandmother. During those family visits, the young people took advantage and met in some square or the romantic dam of the municipality. In this way, love quickly blossomed between Agustina and Juan. Everything was idyllic, at least for a while, as when they chatted on social networks, Juan showed himself to be an honest, gentle, sweet boy, which often happens when you meet someone on social networks. They show you their best face, sometimes not the real one, as in this case. In this way, Agustina felt that she could fully open up to him, that he understood her, that he supported and advised her. However, once the relationship officially started, something changed. Juan Rodrigo's chip changed. It no longer seemed like the young man with whom she spent so many hours chatting on the computer or on the phone. Her boyfriend seemed to be someone else. Better said, she got to know his true face. He took off the mask. Juan began to control and manipulate her. Agustina was forced to give him her cell phone so he could check her messages, her interactions. She had to have answers for everything. She had to justify speaking to anyone, even relatives. Even remotely, Juan tried to control her. He used to come to see her here in Molde. He always came to visit her, but sometimes she always receives him thinking he is a good person, and look what turned out. Suddenly, those visits to Grandma turned into control points. Agustina didn't need friends because she had him. Or well, in quotes, she didn't need friends because he gradually pushed her away from her friends. When he was in Coronel Moldes, he would accompany her to the school gate, wait for her at the exit, accompany her home, go to pick her up. He wouldn't let her breathe. His intention was to control, monitor, toxic. Step by step, Agustina had to take it with him. First love romanticism? Certainly not. Agustina was experiencing the first poisons of a toxic relationship, of a toxic person. The level of this violence, as I tell you, also escalated to a point of no return when Juan Rodrigo hit her for the first time. It didn't matter the reason. If Juan believed that Agustina was at fault, he would give her a corrective blow. But on one occasion, in fact, Agustina decided to discuss that abuse. It was for the worse. In the middle of the street and in front of the Gallardo family, Juan Rodrigo put his hands on Agustina's neck. He had no shame. He squeezed and squeezed. He felt the air escaping from her lungs. However, that time Juan Rodrigo didn't go all the way, luckily. And while he was cutting off her breath, he threw her into the mud as if she were a dirty rag, an old rag. Juan Rodrigo's family witnessed this terrible act without flinching. I mean, we already know where all this violence comes from. Sometimes monsters are created at home, or almost always. She couldn't say anything because of the terror she felt from her boyfriend. If he strangled her and threw her in the mud over a simple argument, what would he do if she reported him? He asked them. Well, the feeling of loneliness plunged his existence into the saddest darkness. Not even the mischief of his brothers and sisters could pull him out of the distress of sadness. The pain of not being able to talk about it with his mother tore his heart apart from the inside. It wasn't just fear of Juan Rodrigo's violence. His biggest fear was disappointing his mother. Agustina lived her entire life in a matriarchal home. She didn't need the image of a man carrying the house on his shoulders.
Instead, her mom and grandmother were the strong pillars she admired, and that strength flowed through her veins when she decided to talk to her mother about Juan Rodrigo's abuses.
The conversation between mother and daughter bore fruit. Agustina allowed herself to cry once more in her mom Janina's arms, like when she was a very little girl. Luckily, Mom Janina's words had an effect, and Agustina had enough strength to break a relationship that in just 4 months had plunged her into the worst of hells. Of course, for his part, Juan Rodrigo did not accept the end of the relationship. He was toxic. In his mind, Agustina was an object of his possession. The text messages and WhatsApp took on a darker, more threatening, more violent tone.
If you're not going to be mine, you're not going to be anyone's.
Those were the clear and terrifying words, so Janina took matters into her own hands and convinced Agustina to file a report at the Coronel Moldes substation on September 21st, 2021. With the messages as evidence of death threats and the girl's words about the acts of violence she suffered on her body, the police authorities proceeded to apply a precautionary measure that prohibited Juan Rodrigo Gallardo from approaching less than 218 yards from his ex-girlfriend, while Agustina was assigned a 15-day police custody, within which 10 would be with officers stationed at the young woman's home 24 hours a day and 5 more days, with occasional patrols during the day. However, the perpetrator did not feel the punishment. A piece of paper wouldn't stop him from seeing Agustina. As he emphasized in his message, she was his or nobody else's. The order meant nothing to him, in fact. Perhaps it meant nothing to the police either, as they paid little attention to the protection of the threatened young woman. There was never a 24-hour guard. In fact, they only came by 3 times a day. They took some pictures of the house and asked Agustina and Nina for a signature to notify that they had been there and nothing more. In a few days, they weren't even seen, meaning they didn't do their job. The assignment only lasted 8 days and was never fixed or personalized as the case required. It's as if they didn't care at all. The field was then clear for this toxic, for the hunter, for the monster. Juan Rodrigo began to harass or bother Agustina. He could appear on any corner. Janina began to pick her up from school to give her some security. They had reached this point because the harassment from the monster Gallardo was persistent and frequent. He persistently bothered her. She changed her phone number thrice. Because she also afterwards she would call a woman and tell her, "I have a message for you." And she just shortened it and called her back and said, "I have a message for you." They had her there, threatened and harassed. On the other hand, not knowing what to do, the dedicated mother approached the provincial women's pole, where a professional asked her for photos of the threats and alerted her that her daughter could be a victim of femicide. The worker at the women's pole urged her to make the police report again and committed to contacting Agustina's school to provide her with support or help. However, she never knew whether the contact with Puerta de Diaz High School was made or not. In addition, when she requested psychological help, they directly sent her to make an appointment at the public hospital. Janina also shared her daughter's situation at school to see if they could help her. But the institution claimed they could do nothing. Thus, the distressed mother went to the substation to expand her complaint. She asked the authorities for a panic button so that if something were to happen, the response would be immediate. She emphasized over and over that several neighbors had witnessed Juan Rodrigo's threats. That was the level of impunity with which that animal operated. However, here we have another, but once again, her voice was not heard. They only recommended her to keep the threatening messages. Only one thing was going around in Janina's head. To the police, her daughter's life didn't matter. Once again, the mother came to her aid and got her a psychologist at the public hospital to vent, to find the strength to get out of that abyss. The professional, on the other hand, recommended her to write her feelings about what was happening with Gallardo in a notebook, and Agustina certainly poured all her emotions onto those pages. The most horrible night when I returned home. When you grabbed me, I felt like a dog that was on the street and being mistreated. In my head, I said, "That's it, I'm a dead girl after all." Every day it's like I see you behind the door, I'm scared to leave the house. I'm afraid of ending up dead somewhere. I'm afraid that you're here. I feel like I was with a little buddy, but the thing is that I go out to the back. I'm afraid to go out on the street. On the other hand, and luckily, or well, we can't say luckily, but for a few days he knew nothing about Juan Rodrigo. And this was the calm before the storm. She was unaware, and clearly nobody knew. But let's say that no one imagined it. She went to school because she always left afterwards. So there the boy waited for her. Just the little companion was missing, and her grandmother stepped forward, and she left afterwards. So there the boy waited for her. It was October 22nd, 2021, and it was 8 in the morning when Agustina walked the 3 blocks that separated her house from the school in the Parque La Loma neighborhood. That day she would not reach the educational establishment because Juan intercepted her. They argued, struggled, and he pushed her against the wall. He pulled her hair while Agustina begged through tears for him to let her go, to please not do anything. But if Juan ever had a shred of kindness, even the slightest bit, there was nothing left in him now. He wasn't human that day. He chose to dress as a devil, a beast. He was prepared, wearing dark clothes, a black hoodie with the hood up, a jewelry, a black backpack, and black gloves. The monster had planned to take over Agustina's life. While the young woman was being squeezed by the hair, being dragged by the hair on the floor, a neighbor intervened, but Juan, like a cornered animal, pulled a large knife from the pocket of his hoodie, one of those specialized for hunting and war, those big ones. The frightened neighbor saw the furious eyes of the aggressor who yelled at her if she was willing to pay for what he had done to Agustina. So the neighbor said that out of fear, she decided to back off and watched as Juan held Agustina against the wall and punched her in the stomach. Agustina took advantage of the distraction to escape, but unfortunately she tripped over a stone and fell to the ground. Juan Rodrigo threw himself on her, his knees pressing down on the young woman's arms and chest. He placed his weapon of war on Agustina's neck and mercilessly slashed it from side to side before running away. As he was escaping life through the cut in his neck, Agustina asked the present neighbors to please call her mom. Her last tears mixed with the crimson red that was dimming her light. On that October 22nd, Juan Rodrigo Gallardo dressed as Death and Agustina lost her life in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, obviously asking for her mom. And we can say that she was also asking for justice, something that the police never did. While Agustina's life was slipping away in a cold ambulance, the first police officers who arrived at the scene found a sidewalk painted red. A neighbor told them that the attacker was surely in the grandmother's house. Juan Rodrigo was known in the neighborhood. Neighbors were present on several occasions when this murderer threatened the girl. No one, for their part, said anything. For them, it was supposedly just a simple lover's quarrel. Thus, the officers immediately went to the indicated place, dealt with the frightened old woman, and Juan Rodrigo Gallardo came out with his hands up and said, "I killed her. I messed up." In this way, he did not resist and they handcuffed him. The damage was already done. Unfortunately, Agustina would no longer belong to anyone. When the nervous grandmother pointed them to the culprit's room, the police found the clothes he had worn a few hours before in the crime and the war knife with red traces. In a sink, they also found the wet sneakers and gloves. At some point, he thought he might get away with it. The forensic doctor revealed the cause of the young woman's death, a 10.63 inches cut in the neck. And with this, justice had to be awake and not fall into the typical labels of a crime of passion. This was a clear case of femicide, so Janina Cruz called for the maximum penalty, which is life imprisonment. And I repeat to you again, everyone was in shock with what happened. To give you an idea, the mayor and his government chief approached the Cruz's house to offer their support, but both men had to leave the mournful home because their mere presence caused a nervous breakdown in the grandmother. The marches demanding justice for Agustina likewise spread throughout Coronel Moldes and Salta to highlight the alarming number of femicide victims. Thousands of people approached the main square of the municipality with pictures of the young woman and a lit candle in her honor.
Agustina's classmates also gathered, but from the Puerta de Diaz Secondary School they were forbidden to go in school uniform so as not to tarnish the name and reputation of the educational establishment.
And so, in less than a month, the trial precisely began, and to be more exact, on November 7th, the arguments and testimonies deepened the wound of the Cruz family. Not only because of the evidence that Juan Rodrigo meticulously planned the attack. I already told you that he had latex gloves, he had washed the clothes and sneakers with blood stains, they even found a ski mask on him. But beyond these precautions, the evidence was overwhelming. Eyewitnesses pointed him out as the aggressor, and one of the neighbors filmed the entire attack on her cell phone. He couldn't drop the knife. And from there, he went on. Like that, he ran off. Yes, he was already prepared. He was determined. He was determined to do that. Yes, he was already determined to do that.
How quickly did the ambulance arrive?
Half an hour. And the cops also came on foot. The patrol car was nowhere to be found. And they came on foot. But late, the ambulance always arrives late. Even though no one did anything, neither police, nor municipal officials, nor school, nor neighbors. It was Janina and Agustina facing the inevitable. No one listened to them. Now, without her daughter, all Janina Cruz hopes for is that the sentence will be exemplary. Finally, on November 22nd, 2021, a month after Agustina's macabre end, Juan Rodrigo Gallardo received a life sentence. And even though before receiving the verdict he asked for forgiveness from his family, from Agustina, from God, and from society, no empty words were going to alleviate the pain he caused Janina and the Cruz family. For them, he didn't deserve any kind of forgiveness.
He took Agustina away forever, and for me, he also doesn't deserve forgiveness.
He should rot in jail. On the other hand, Janina Cruz is still seeking justice for her daughter and will take the police authorities to court for abandonment because they didn't care. The evidence was on her side, from the police order that was never fulfilled to the ineffective implementation of said custody. In addition, she had the extension she made to the complaint, the mother, and the request for the panic button that they never gave her. Well, with the horrible end of Agustina, the accusing finger pointed not only at institutions, but at an entire society.
Why did the principal of DSS Gate High School distance herself from the situation?
Why didn't the women's division follow up on the case? Why didn't the police comply with the order and the custody? Why aren't the aggressors, who in these cases are free living their lives, while the victims are forced to be locked in their homes with fear, in every corner, in every shadow, being watched? Why aren't the policies against gender violence applied and still not given the importance they should have in each municipality and police station in each country?
Well, the unanswered questions pile up in Janina's mind and obviously in all of our minds.
A mother who today is without her daughter and to whom neither the apology from the monster who took her life, nor from the police in charge making excuses that they didn't have many officers, nor from anyone else is of any use. Agustina is no longer here and she will go to the utmost consequences, and I hope she succeeds. Her fight is so that there are no more Agustinas, so that there is not one less woman. He has killed my daughter. He has taken my daughter from me. He has to die. Those who kill have to die. Or they give him to me when he gets out of jail. I'm going to wait for him. He has done this to my daughter. He has to die. He doesn't have to get out of jail. I already said, if he gets out of jail, I'm going to wait for him. I'm going to do to him what he did to my daughter. I'm not going to allow him to walk free as if nothing happened. I no longer have my daughter. But not only the pain of a mother and a family was exposed, but also the ineffectiveness and triviality with which these types of complaints are treated by the police force. Because if they had listened to Janina in the constant complaints, Agustina's life could have been saved and she would have continued with her dreams. Today we wouldn't know her name, but misfortune knocked on her door, and those who should have listened so that she wouldn't open that door to a dark fate, well, they didn't listen. If you enjoy these videos, don't forget the Muchos Más Misterios podcast every Thursday discussing crime, mystery, and paranormal topics. I do it with my partner Edson, and you can find it on Spotify and all audio platforms on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you.